Well, I appreciate your conversation, and also your realization that perfection is among us, but yet we strive for it. One of the things that we often think about is John Wesley talked about moving on to perfection, and realizing that we're not necessarily there in this world, but that doesn't mean we don't strive for that. And is it off? I thought the other one, is it on now? Yeah. All right. You told me it was on and it wasn't. I'm sorry. It's all your fault. But moving on to perfection is something we do that, but we move on to perfection in love. And part of the question that I've pondered with as I was thinking through this today is perfection, and what's my role in that? God has provided all we need. How do we live toward that? And I think that's a part of what Isaiah is trying to push us toward. The outline of the book of Isaiah is the slide that you see before you. Judgment and hope for Jerusalem. And that's where we are this week with this particular passage, but also judgment and hope for the nations, the rise and fall of Jerusalem, the announcement of hope, the servant fulfills God's mission, and the servants inherit God's kingdom with that. So that's a progression of perfection, the realization of where we are, the hope that we can find in the midst of that, and then we move forward. I don't know if you were in the 11:15 service on Sunday or not, but that's part of what Bob Levinson was talking to us about, is the perfection of love. Is that we all move toward that. And even though we have things that are not perfect in our lives, we still strive through love to be perfected. One of the things that I put on your table, and Brian called it a placemat this morning, but this is a resource. If you're not familiar with these folks, it's a group that you need to be aware of. I really appreciate what we do. This is called the Bible Project. It's a group of folks who look at God's word, provide resources for it. And in every book of the Bible, they do one of these placemats, if you want to call it, where you get a chance to look at the progression of that particular book of the Bible. And I thought it's a very helpful thing to look at. And I think based on the categories that we talked about earlier, a few seconds ago, that it moves us forward through this understanding of the book of Isaiah. And so not something you have to spend a whole lot of time with right now, but it is, I have several of these folded up in smaller versions of it, just an 8.5 by 11 sheet, but I thought it was easier to see the 11 by 17 that we have here. For some of us, it's easier to see that way. And so, I'll just fold these suckers up and put them in my Bible. And it's just a quick overview, a great way to look at it. And if you go to YouTube, they actually have them there by panel, and they just kind of move it, and you see the drawing as it evolves with that. So some of you are shaking your head and you may be already familiar with them. Phil just mentioned they have podcasts too, for those of you that are online this morning with that. But I want us to move on then to the beginning of the first 5 verses here. And you have that on your table also this morning, the text for what we're going to do. A shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest on them, or him, and the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek and for of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. So as you're looking at this passage, it talks about, first of all, a shoot shall come from the stump of Jesse. What is a shoot? And a shoot is a new branch that grows out of an original plant or a tree. And so sometimes we see healthy trees and plants that have shoots coming out of them, and we begin to see, most of the time as we begin spring, we see these new little shoots starting to come out of the branches, and we see growth, and we see nourishment that comes from that. And also, I guess a symbol of that also is it is new life. It is new life that becomes out of these little shoots that we have. But it also talks about a stump, the stump of Jesse. In some translations, it's called a stem, some stalk, a broken tree, trunk, whatever the words might be. But most of the time, I see stump in most translations. And it talks about a stump of Jesse. Now, who was Jesse? Jesse is a friend. Okay. In the Bible, who is Jesse? King David's father. So we have this shoot that's coming out of Jesse. But it talks about the fact that out of this also is that a stump is a tree that is worthless a lot of times. A tree that has been, the trunk is gone, the leaves are gone, the fruit is gone. Basically, you have a stump. And in the time of Jesus, a stump was a useless thing because you couldn't eat out of it. You couldn't have growth to take place. There was no shade. There was nothing. All it is a stump. And for many of us, when we cut down a tree, either healthy or unhealthy around our house, if we leave the stump, it's just there. And that's part of what we're talking about in this. It's cut off. It's hewn down. It's left to die. And a lot of times when we cut trees down around our house, we do it because the tree itself is lost life or is losing life. So it's a lifeless tree. It is gone. And in this particular passage that we have this beginning of the announcement and the realization that the house of David has gone a while, will go for a while, has gone for a while without having anything dominant. It is a dormant tree stump with that. And the Lord wanted Judah to know that even though the Assyrians and others would come and judgment and all that, you've got this tree stump of Israel at this point in time. And God is helping the folks remember that even though this stump appears to be lifeless, something's still going to come from it. And even if you look like it's dead and it's not worth anything, all of a sudden you see this little shoot come up. One of the things that happens around my house is that every spring, Joy begins to walk our property and begin to talk about all the trees and all the places that there's not life happening when life is happening around it. We got a couple of dogwoods that are very late bloomers every year. And for the last several years, every year she says, that tree's not going to make it. It's not. And then give it a little more time. And then all of a sudden, these little green things start popping out on the tree. And it would be really easy to say, yeah, that tree's dead, and cut it down in the midst of life. But we're reminded by God in this that sometimes what appears to be dead, what appears to be non-productive, you'll begin to see this little shoot come up from that. Now, there were those in the time of Jesus, in the time of prior to this, in the time that we're talking about with Isaiah, that you would still say that it's still a worthless tree because we can't get anything from it at this point. It has to be given time. And so the Lord emphasized to the people that that it is a matter of waiting for that. And sometimes waiting is hard. And again, 600 years from the time of this writing until the time of Jesus with that. But where does this come from? And it's interesting to me, why was it picked by Isaiah that we would talk about Jesse and not David? Why is Jesse the stump? David's the shoot. Jesse is part of this, I think is a statement of humility. You don't begin with the one who's famous, because you can't have the one who's famous without what? Those who have gone before. And so a lot of times, one of the things that's interesting in this world is we've gotten more and more interested about our genealogy and our heritage and where we're from and who we're related to and all those kinds of things, is that everybody had an ancestor before them that was the stump. The one that created and cultivated, the one that supported, the one that nurtured, the one that grew, the one who became famous. That we have in our lives and around us. But it also, in this particular, why use the metaphor of a tree? Why do we use this symbol? If you go back to the 10th chapter of the book of Isaiah, you'll see the passage here, 33-34. Look, the sovereign Lord of hosts will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The tallest trees will be cut down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will hack down the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon and its majestic trees will fall. What was in Lebanon related to trees? Cedars, the most valuable trees in the area. Those were the ones that you used ornamentally. Those were the things that woodworkers used to create beauty with that. But yet sometimes it could be, they think of themselves in a lofty way. They think of themselves. So the Lord chops down the proud, which means the unrighteous, the unfaithful, the ones that think of themselves higher. That's not humility. That's self-pride. That is the ability to promote oneself. So the new picture, the Lord is looking over these stumps, and he's creating for us an opportunity to see life come in a new way. So in the chapter just previous to this, he's already talking about doing away with trees. And then he talks about the stumps and how even in the midst of that, you can see new life. One of a couple of the pictures that are coming up here. This is the next picture is in the Garden of Gethsemane in Israel, in Jerusalem. And in this picture and the next several, if you'll go to the next couple, just go through them briefly. These trees are between 12 and 2,000 years old. 1,200 and 2,000 years. And you'll see on the midst of these trees, these what appear to be dead stumps, dead trees that the tops have fallen away, but yet grafted into them over history and time, you have new stumps, you have new shoots that have come out of this. And it would be really easy to come in and to mow these trees down. But yet in the midst of this, these trees, because the arid nature of that area and the ability to bring life, in this place that Jesus agonized, in this place that Jesus really within himself pushed himself and acknowledged God's presence, but also called on God's assistance at this time. And so you have these shoots that are coming out of what would appear to be a dead tree. So we move on to the next slide here. And one of the things that it is Netzer is the word that is used for those shoots. And it's the root word for the city of Nazareth. So you have, what is this relationship? All of a sudden you have this Netzer, this root that you have in there, and it's the Hebrew word for sprout, and instead of spout, it is sorry about the typo there, but it is a Hebrew word for sprout, which again would have been seen as useless. It will take too long for the fruit to bear. It's taking too long for it to come to maturity. It's a useless town. Nazareth is a useless town that at the time of Jesus was 12 to 24 families, as best we could tell. But it was off the main trade route. It was a know-nothing convenience store at best. But the interesting thing about that is that if someone, in another way of looking at it, is a Nazarene was someone who obviously is from Nazareth. And the word was used as a word of contempt. If you called somebody a Nazarene, it was not a compliment. And people that had nothing to do with Nazareth would be called Nazarenes as a way of putting them down. It would be like saying, someone's a hick. Someone is someone that doesn't fit in. Someone is of no consequence. And so you have this town, this city of which Jesus comes from, being talked about as a know-nothing place. It's off the trade route. But the interesting thing is, it's not very far from the trade route. You can almost imagine this. In fact, if I put the Bible verse here, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And that's said by Nathaniel, who's also, which is what he's called in the book of John, Bartholomew and the others, who becomes a disciple. And when he is invited by Philip to be a follower of Jesus, hey, I found this guy, you need to come and hear him. The first thing that he says is, he's from Nazareth? How can anything good come out of Nazareth? It's a know-nothing place. You don't go there for any reason. It's just totally out of the way. But interestingly, 3.9 miles away is the city of Zipporah. Zipporah was the capital, the Roman capital of the Galilee. It was the booming place. It was the place of commerce. It was the place that everything was happening. And you went from, the trade route went down from the north. Remember, you're coming from Asia, you're coming from Europe. It's coming down through the middle of Israel, through the north into this area, and it gets to the Sea of Galilee, to Capernaum. And Capernaum was the center of trade for that whole area, and it's 30 miles away from Nazareth. But Nazareth is a know-nothing place. It's a place that you only go there if you get lost, or you have family there, and bless their hearts if that's where they live. And it's really easy to imagine that. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina that's about 40 miles from Charlotte. And, it's a place, again, that had 5,000 people when I was growing up, and that's probably about what it has now, although now it's close to Salisbury, and it's a suburb of Salisbury now. The postal service now is Salisbury address. So we have moved up big in the area with that. So anyway, it's an interesting thing. But we move on and not spend too much time on that, but we spend then talking about the Spirit of the Lord and who and what the Spirit of the Lord is with that. So the Spirit of the Lord will come and rest upon him. The branch comes from the apparent dead stump, but in that we've talked about there's new life. And there's other places in the Bible too where we talk about life coming from things that are dead. You remember the bones, the dry bones, and we're going to have these dry bones get up and dancing. We're going to have them up and moving. New life is going to come from something that is dead. Everybody looked at it and said it's dead, but it's now going to be doing that. It's going to have lots of life. And so the Spirit of the Lord is upon the Messiah that we anticipate. So God of Israel rests upon this individual. And Jesus was the Spirit of the Lord, and he knew it, is what the Gospel of John tells us. The Gospel of John says, no doubt that from the very beginning of time, this Netzer is a part of God's kingdom and God's creation. The Spirit of wisdom is upon the Messiah. And we see there that it's not just that Jesus has wisdom, Jesus is the wisdom. It is through Jesus that we understand that. The Spirit of understanding, in all-knowing, sharpness of judgment, things that come out of that. The Spirit of counsel is upon the Messiah. So the Messiah has both wisdom and understanding and able to be the perfect counselor to those around him. The Spirit of might. Many people would help us if they're needing power and have none. So out of this, we have the Messiah doing that. So Jesus, was pleased to be whatever Jesus could be for God. And that's the invitation that we have from this passage too, that we need to be all that we can be for God. And then there's the Spirit of knowledge. He knows our hearts. He knows our facts. He knows everything that needs to be known. The Lord is he, and Jesus is fearful of God, not fearful in the sense of being afraid, but fearful in the sense of respect and knowledge and understanding. And so these 7 things begin to help us understand what it is that the Messiah brings to us. 7 is obviously a number of perfection. It is a number of completeness. And so a symbol again that we have of that. And then we move on to 6 through 10. And then we'll finish up with this. The wolf shall live with the lamb. And this is at that perfect kingdom, if you want to call it that. The leopard shall be to lie down with the kid, and the calf and the lion and the fatling together. What is a fatling, other than me? What is a fatling? Something that's been fed so it can be harvested and used at a banquet or whatever. A fatling is something that's intentionally been encouraged to gain weight. With that. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, and the young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. For the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, and the waters cover the sea. And on that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal or a banner, as is said in some translations, to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwellings shall be glorious. So when the Messiah reigns, nature will be transformed. No longer will there be predators among the animals. And it was seen that all the animals will be plant eaters. And where have we seen this before? In the scriptures. Interestingly, in Genesis, it is not until after Noah that God says, okay, eat the animals. It's okay to do that. Prior to that, plant eating is seemed to be the way that everybody went, vegetarian. Not only would the way the animals relate to each other and be changed, but the way in which they relate to humans will be changed. It's at that point that God says in Genesis that the Lord gives him permission to eat, but it also says it's not going to be easy. They're going to be fearful of you. They're going to avoid you. You're going to have to pursue them, but they'll also not respect you at that point. And so the little child will be safe and will be able to live a life around what would be unnatural things. One other quick question to deal with around your table is the next one here. If you were to proclaim this passage in today's world, what pairs of things would you use, and what would they be doing to make the point that you're trying to make? Just around your table really quickly. You know, we've got animals, and I recently gave you the text there. You can go back and look at all these animals, how they relate to each other. If you were to proclaim this in this world, this was unique to that world, what would be the things that you would have of pairs that would be unusual partners in life, and how would they relate to one another?
Well, gentlemen, what do you think?
Andy, are we off the big screen now, or the whole group?
You are off the big screen.
I would say the Democrats shall lay down with the Republicans, and there shall be peace, or they'll work together to promote the betterment of all mankind.
We'll have full bipartisan agreement.
Obviously talking about opposing groups that
Yeah,
like these examples.
I'd say the atheists and the rest of the Christians will.
Yeah, throw the Muslims
have
in there
harmony.
too, because
Yeah, there you go.
that's a heavy one.
Yeah, I think the Muslims and the Christians have a better chance of getting together than the Democrats and the Republicans.
Well, Armin, we can only start. We okay. We'll have to hold out the olive branch. We'll be the first ones to start. What other pairs would y'all pick? Polar opposites. How about racists, whoever they are, and non-racists? Let's see, the Falcons and the Saints will all play together. Georgia and Georgia Tech, all the football players will all play on the same field together. Or maybe we should go Georgia and Alabama, or Georgia and Michigan State. What? Michigan,
Georgia and Florida.
Georgia and Florida. There you
Yeah,
go. Okay.
Georgia and Florida, Georgia and Auburn. We've got a lot of teams that we play that we don't like very much, Andy. I can just tell you.
Well, anyways, okay. Point. That's the point. Okay. Any other polar opposites you can think of? Any other polar opposites that come to mind?
How about men and women will actually start thinking the same way?
Oh, there you go.
Oh, now, hey, come on, Andy. Come on, Andrew, Armin, come on.
That was a good one. No, that's good. Oh, yeah. The Russians and the Ukrainians, maybe the Russians and the Americans, the Chinese. I guess this has to be the political leaders. Yeah, religion and politics, we kind of hit that. I'm struggling to think of other polar opposites. Those are the things that divide us and unite us.
Yeah, how about the plaintiff and the defendant?
Yeah, there you go. That's good. Yeah, the drivers and the pedestrians.
Me and everyone else on 400.
There you go. I'm going to flip us back around to podium, you gentlemen. And I think David's going to leave us with some questions here in just a minute. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, what are some of your pairs? Just shout them out. Democrats and Republicans. Christians and Muslims. Brothers and sisters. Yeah, Buckeyes and Wolverines, but the Buckeyes have already laid down. With yeah, Georgia and Tech. But I think as we begin to think through all of these, you know, there are times that unusual pairs come together. Unusual things happen in our world that people in ways that we can't even think about, for the good of humanity, for the good for all, come together and do things together without even thinking about. Our pandemic was like that. People reaching out to people that they had no idea who they were, never met them before, would probably not have done so in other circumstances. But nothing seemed to be divisive, at least in helping others. Now, then there became the awkwardness of how then can we create difference and how can we still stay apart? And that's a hard thing. You know, I once heard a sermon, I still remember it as a high school kid, you know, a pastor in my home church who made the comment that if we woke up in the morning first thing and everybody was alike and the same, and we all had common values, we all had common everything, by noon, we'd already found ways to divide us. And now part of that is just our natural differences and our preferences and those kinds of things. But it seems like it's always our goal to make different, to make sure that I'm egocentric enough that I'm able to get what I want the way I want it with the people that I want to do it with. And that's a very hard and difficult thing with that. One of the comments, and Phil, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but if you just share with us your just comment of kind of where you're going with the sermon on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll still show up. Yeah, unfortunately, but I think it's about how we invest in relationships. And there's something beautiful about the way that the shoot of Jesse is able to change the way that people relate to each other. And after changing the way that people relate to each other, that even takes over in the animal kingdom, and we come back to how we were originally created in Eden. So there's a sense of coming all the way back to Eden, that the wolf shall lie down with the lamb. And one of the funny things is, every year we put up our Christmas ornaments, and people, you know, give me these fabulous Christmas ornaments. I have at least two of these, the lion and the lamb. But that's not the scripture text. The scripture text is the wolf and the lamb. But what happened is, when they translated the King James Version, they liked lion and lamb better because it sounded better. So they translated it lion and lamb instead of wolf and lamb. Now this is still appropriate because Jesus is the Lion of Judah and the Lamb of God. So I'm okay with the lion and the lamb being put together. But this really is not the biblical image. The biblical image is the wolf and the lamb. It happens twice in Isaiah. So for me, it's about where are you investing? Are you investing in the right things? Are the things that last, or are you investing in the things that don't last? And the Messiah shows us what our investments ought to look like in those first few passages. And if those investments go well, then it can change the whole creative world. So those are my thoughts for Sunday. You don't have to comment. Maybe there'll be more about that. I'm also going to talk about tech ball.
All right, we're coming to the end of our time, and I'm not going to do the other questions I had for you this morning, but I think it is helpful for us to find a way to wrap this around your table too, based on the comments you just heard from Phil and your own thoughts. spend the next 2 minutes, if you would, wrapping this up for your conversation around the table. What have you heard each other say? What is your role in God's world as we move through this Advent season? What are your hopes and dreams for what you will come out of this Christmas being like? How can you be that voice in the wilderness that cries out for God's people? So spend a moment doing that.
David, I'm sorry, Andy, we can't.
We couldn't hear you, Andy.
Yeah, Andy, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was gonna say 2 minutes, which is what we have left, is just about enough time for me to get the camera and microphone turned around. So,
This is a boatload. It's a boatload to cover. I guess, when he finally says, and I guess that's the question of every week's sermon, isn't it? That, what are we taking away from this? What can we do to make the world a better place or bring peace?
there you go. Yes. So any other things that, gentlemen, that we should be doing this Advent season to bring the kingdom of God a little closer?
I think it helps to get the decorations up. We spent this past weekend, decorating the house, getting the tree set up, and putting all the Christmas knickknacks out. It kind of gets you focused on the coming season. I know it's sometimes a bit commercial and whatnot, but it gets you thinking about the birth of Jesus and what a significant event that is in our lives and the lives of everyone in the world. I mean, without Jesus, we don't have a church, we don't have this meeting, and we're not forgiven for our sins.
And if we're not
Oh, and
forgiven,
I
then
like
we have
what-
struggle to forgive others, right?
Yeah, and I like the fact that we're doing so much in our church with the youth now. I mean, you've got to start somewhere, and to bring them closer to the church and the kinds of things that Jesus taught us gives them a foundation.
We can pay it forward. So, gentlemen, Christmas blessings to all of you. Happy Thanksgiving. It's good to see you. It's good to see you again.
Thank you,
Thank
Andy.
you,
Good to see you
Andy.
too. Thanks for coming back.
And you're welcome. Yeah, I would say I wouldn't miss it for the world, but sometimes I miss. So, gentlemen,
Thank
until
you.
next week.
So we're not going to have a sign out or anything like that, Andy?
A sign out.
Pray out.
Oh yeah. If y'all would go ahead. Well, I'm gonna flip the camera around again. So
Okay.
we'll pray us out.
Okay, great. Great to see you again.
Good to see y'all too.
Ponder them a little bit today. When in your life has a child led you in a deeper understanding of your faith? If a child is going to lead us, who are those children in your lives that have given you understanding? When has something in your life seemed dead and dormant, then brought back to new life to you in an unexpected way? Where in your life has there been a relationship or a situation or a thing in your life that you thought had been dead and dormant and now has somehow miraculously come to new life? And in what ways do you pray that the love of Jesus will bring peace to you during Advent and Christmas?